Unit 3 of Accessories for the Head and the Neck, Module 4, Neckties. This is Module 4 of the third unit, which is all about neckties. Can a narrow strip of fabric bestow formal appreciation, power, and credibility on the wearer? If your answer to that question is no, then you are yet to fully grasp the power that the necktie has in our modern world. Both fashion experts and socialists have been discussing the need and importance of ties for years. In this unit, we will attempt to understand some of these deliberations. We will discuss the historical evolution of ties and list various knots of neckties. Some of these knots will be shown to you through practical demonstrations. We will also attempt to take a look at some of the variations of ties, such as the bow tie or the bolo tie, and also look at some fancy ties like zipper ties. Come, now let's delve deep into the world of neckwear. A necktie is a long piece of cloth, preferably lined and hemmed, that is worn around the neck and knotted. It is the symbol of gentlemanliness, of poise, respect, and status. Neckties can be worn by both men and women. They are worn as a part of school uniforms, in college formals, and as a part of military uniforms. Long ties can be woven or knitted. They can be solid, striped, textured, or patterned. The pattern could be created using Dobby or jacquard weaves. The ties could even be printed, hand-painted, and even at times embroidered. Neckties can be made up of silk, wool, linen, cotton, and even polyester. Tie width and length is largely determined by fashion trends. Long neckties can measure between 48 inches to 65 inches in length, going up to even 70 inches for extra long ties. These are suitable for gentlemen who are really tall. While wide ties are over 5 inches wide, the narrow one can be as lean as 1 inch. Ties that are between 3 inches to 3.75 inches wide are called as classic ties and can be found in most menswear brands. Long neckties are worn with tie pins and tie clips, and they can be accompanied by matching pocket squares and cufflinks. Variations of the long necktie. The necktie or tie as we know today is technically known as the long necktie. However, there are so many other variations of this tie that you can see in the fashion industry around you. Let me list down some of these variations for you in the order of probably their chronological appearance and or the importance that they have in our society. The first variation that I'm going to talk to you about is the cravat. The cravat or the cravat were neck scarves that were knotted into a bow at the neck. It is considered more formal than an ascot, and it's worn outside the shirt like regular neckties. So now what is this ascot? The name Ascot is derived from England's Ascot races, where the Ascot tie was seen being worn. It is a wide pointed necktie wherein each end is of equal width and is tied together in a simple knot. It is considered casual compared to the cravat and can be worn directly on the neck and tucked inside the partially unbuttoned shirt. Many people are confused between the ascot and the cravat and when to wear them. Though there are no strict rules, well, yes, they are, and they can be confusing. I would say that if an occasion is super formal, or something like a white tie even, or where you have to dress up at your very best, then go for a cravat. If it is more of a day event, a luncheon or an evening tea, but still you want to be formal, then you can go for a cravat. The third kind of neckwear that I would like to talk about is the fascinating ruff. What is ruff? A ruff is a starched linen collar or a lace collar that was extremely popular during the Renaissance. You can look at ruff collars if you look at portraits of Queen Elizabeth. If you've seen pictures or portraits of Shakespearean characters, you would see most of the kings or the counts wearing starched collars that probably had a little ruffle on top. This was a variation of the ruff as well. The larger ruff, called the cartwheel ruffs, had a basic wire support system called as a supportase or an underpropper. These were typically worn by women, noblewomen or queens. These were a potent symbol of status and wealth, as anyone who could afford to wear and maintain a ruff was clearly not doing any manual labor. Then came the jabot. Now this is a neckband with ruffles or frills worn at the neck and falling over the top button of the shirt to the front chest. It was an essential part of male fashion in the Baroque period. However, today, can you imagine a man wearing a cascade of ruffles over his shirt? Well, I do look forward to seeing such impeccably dressed men. Bow tie. The bow tie is a descendant of the knotted cravat. It was born from the need for neckwear that was easier to wear than the cravat and that would last throughout a more active day. Now bow ties can be butterfly ties, batwing ties, ties that have pointed edges. Now, black silk satin bow ties are considered as classics. Bolo tie. If you've looked at southern or western movies, cowboy movies, you would see the sheriff probably wearing a bolo tie. Also known as shoestring ties or bola ties, these ties are made up of leather cords with metal tips or anklets and are secured with a brooch-like ornamental slider. These ties are associated with the western or southern look in USA. And then they were made very famous by the teddy boy subculture in the UK, and they are known as bootlace ties. Finally, we come to the category of fancy ties. Any neckwear that does not fall into any of the above categories can be classified as a fancy tie. Fancy ties include clip-on ties, knotted ties on an elastic band, bows on elastic bands, and zipper ties. These are ready-made ties, that is, they are available readily knotted and can be worn easily without having to learn how to do the knots. Though they can be worn by anybody and they are preferred for younger children and for older people who cannot fiddle with the knots, they are best left for performances. For an gentlemanly, poised, elegant look, it is always better if you knot a regular necktie. Now that we have seen some variations of neckties, I would like to talk a little bit about the historical evolution of ties. While it is not possible to date the exact origin of ties, it is plausible to trace its predecessors. In ancient Egypt, the pharaohs are said to have worn a talisman around the neck. now known as the Knot of Isis. The terracotta soldiers buried with Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of unified China in 3rd century BC, can be seen wearing tight neck scarves. Now, these could have been worn to protect them from the cold or from armor-based chafing. But what we know is that these two items could have very well be the predecessors of scarves and cravats that finally led to the evolution of the modern necktie. Now, with a little bit of a fast forward, we come to the 16th century. In 1560s, starched collars with ruffles on top came to be independent items of clothing known as ruffs. We have just talked about these ruffs before. Ruffs were expensive, luxurious garment components that could take hours to set. The placement on the neck affected posture, forcing the wearer to keep a proud and haughty pose. In the 1620s, during the reign of King Charles I, the ruff was replaced by a falling band collar and slowly disappeared. Then came the knotted scarves known as the cravats. Now these were named after the courts that introduced them in the court of Louis XIV. 1650 onwards, scarves, jabots and cravats and even bow ties appeared with consistent regularity as a badge of nobility. So, how did we move on from a cravat to a modern necktie? In the Western world, the Steinkirk is considered to be the predecessors of neckties. The Steinkirk was a simple knotted cravat worn by the French soldiers in the Battle of Steinkirk in 1692. It was when the French soldiers did not have time to dress themselves up and had to hurriedly rush into battle by simply knotting and crossing the cravat rather than tying it into an elaborate bow. This led to the simplification of knots, and then the ties transcended the military uniform to become a means of individual expression in civilian dress. In the 1700s, the macaronis, whom we talked about in the previous modules, made the cravats popular. The dandy look then created by Beau Brummel made cravats a fashion must-have for men. In 1818, Neckcloth Tantiana, an illustration depicting 14 popular styles of tying neckcloth, was published. The word tie was used for the first time to describe neckwear in this publication, and the name stuck. Count d'Orsay introduced cravats of soft silks in shades of green, black, turquoise and even primrose. He is the one who introduced the concept of wearing a black tie with a black jacket, and hence he is considered to be one of the forefathers of the black tie tuxedo. Then came the Industrial Revolution. With it, ties became thinner and longer. Knots were made in such a way that the ties did not come undone during the course of the day. The four-in-hand knot became the most preferred knot. Ties came to be mass-produced. By 1860s, jabots were simplified and it became two simple rectangles. These rectangles are even said to represent the tablets of Moses in Old Testament. Even today, they are worn by barristers. In the 1880s, the British military decided to abandon their brightly colored uniforms such as yellow and red in favor of khaki and olive, such drab uniforms in order for better camouflage. These bright colors were not cast away, but instead they were worn as striped ties. These stripes came to be known as regimental stripes. These regimental ties were also used as a way to differentiate between soldiers of different regiments. Even today, they are prized possessions and collectors' items. By the end of the 19th century, the butterfly and the batwing bow tie were commonplace. Black bow ties were worn with dinner jacket, and white bow ties were worn with evening tails. Thus came into existence your black tie and white tie looks. In 1926, the world of ties changed for good. A New York tie maker, Jesse Langsdorf, came up with a method of cutting the fabric on bias and sewing it in 3 parts. This method improved elasticity and facilitated the fabric's return to its original shape. Thus, the ties became even more durable. Now this was further augmented by Richard Atkinson and Company of Belfast. They claim to have introduced the slip stitch in securing the lining and the interlining in this tie, thereby making it even more durable. Now, when you look at ties, what is the thing that captivates you the most apart from the knot? The colors and the patterns, of course. As an effect of drab clothing during the World Wars, the periods after them saw flamboyant ties. They were printed and even hand-painted. Now this look was considered to be the bold look. The length and width of ties changed throughout the 20th century, enabling men to create a variety of looks. Colors of ties were and are still used to give out subtle messages. Red tie symbolizes power and patriotism. If you notice, most American presidents, when addressing the people, wear red ties. Navy blue ties are considered to give a notion of honesty. Hence, people appearing before judges or students appearing for interviews or for referral committees tend to wear navy blue ties. Burgundy tie is said to represent poise, while quirky prints are a celebration of youth. Solid, shiny satin ties in bold colors are considered tacky and ungentlemanly and hence should be avoided at all costs. A grenadine tie is textured, woven silk tie that looks a little like a knitted tie. It is associated with powerful, iconic men in cinema like Sean Connery, who played James Bond. I strongly recommend a grenadine tie if you are looking to add a valuable purchase to your wardrobe. Hermes ties, or for that matter, Satyapal ties in India, are considered to be a mark of status. So if you wear one such tie, it means that you have arrived in this world. Now that we have seen a brief history and evolution of ties, it is time to look at different tie knots. There are innumerable ways to knot a tie. Some say that there are many thousands of ways to knot ties. However, to make your job simple, here is a list of dozen commonly used tie knots that you must know of. These would be very useful to you when you are trying to create different looks for yourselves and for your clients. First, the four-in-hand knot. The four-in-hand knot seems to have a story behind the name. It derives the name from the four-horse carriage. The knot resembles the way the carriage driver would knot his reins, thus keeping four horses in hand or four in hand. It is also known as a simple knot or a schoolboy knot. If ties were a part of your school uniform, as it was a part of mine, you would be extremely familiar with this knot. It's very easy to tie, slender, tapered, mildly asymmetrical, and self-releasing. It is the best knot for everyday wear. A Windsor knot. A full Windsor or a double Windsor produces a wide, symmetrical triangular knot. It is best suited for a cutaway collar shirt. It is accepted as formal wear not only in most companies as a part of their dress code, but also in a lot of armed forces throughout the world. Half Windsor knot. It's a simplified version of a full Windsor knot that produces a neat triangular knot that is bigger than the four in hand but smaller than the full Windsor. Now, this is considered to be a bit of a compromise. It is easier than the full Windsor knot and hence suitable for everyday wear, but nothing like a full Windsor to make a great impression for formal occasions. Then we have some ornate knots that you must know. The Eldredge Knot. The Eldredge Knot is an ornate knot which is produced by using the small end as the active end, creating a tapered fishtail braid-like effect. It is a beautiful knot that is highly suitable for dinner parties and as evening wear. Pratt Knot. The Pratt Knot or the Shelby Knot is prepared with a reverse side out in the beginning. It uses less length than the Windsor knots, so it is well suited to shorter ties or to taller men. It is also a great knot to use when you are starting out. An Oriental knot is compact with an asymmetry, causing it to lean towards the active end. The fun part about this tie is that it starts with the reverse side facing the front. It's a very simple knot and can be done in just a matter of 1 or 2 minutes. Trinity knot. This knot has a three-way symmetry and resembles the Celtic triquetra. Tied using the small end as the active end, this knot is initially tied loosely and then pulled tight at the very end to get a rounded shape. It's a beautiful ornate knot that can be tied very easily. Prince Albert knot. In the Prince Albert knot, the active end is passed through both the first and the second turnings. The first turning should peek out at the bottom of the knot. This slightly asymmetrical knot has a little more bulk than the four in hand, but should be pulled tight to give it a slender and a polished look. Wijk knot. It is an augmentation of the Prince Albert knot by adding a third turning of the active end. This long and slender knot creates a striking, layered, cylindrical effect. Balthus knot. The Balthus knot was invented by Balthasar Klosowski, a Polish French modern artist. The Balthus knot is a large, broad, conical knot. Because of the number of times the wide end is wrapped around the small end, the finished tie will be very short when completed. Murell knot. Invented by Brent Murell in 1995, the Murell is an inversion of a classic Windsor knot. In its completed form, the tail end lays in front of the large end, creating a rather playful layered look. It can be used to create interesting patterns with a double-sided tie. The Onassis knot. This is a very interesting tie knot pattern where the knot is not visible in the end. It is prepared by behind and over the existing knot at the end of a standard Windsor knot. But you must start with a tie that is long enough for you to achieve this effect. Now these are simple knots and ornate knots that can also be tied with a very little effort. There is another category of fancy knots which require some time, effort and practice from your side to master. Fancy knots include True Love Knot, Boutonniere's Knot, Merovingian Knot that you might have seen in the Matrix, Atlantic Knot, Cape Knot, Fishbone Knot, Taurus Knot and the Four Rings Knot. They enable the wearer to show off his creative style and skill. Even though they are not considered completely formal, they work really well as evening wear and parties where you get to show off your wardrobe. Suggestion activity 3. In the unit on neckwear, on ties and the subsequent unit on shawls, I have demonstrated various ways in which ties and shawls can be worn. Now I would like you to go on the internet and to the market to look at the various styles that are available. Pick out a tie that you are most gravitated towards. Include its picture in your learning diary. Learn to wear a tie using at least one or two of the knots that were suggested. You can also come up with new ways to drape your shawl or your scarf. You can either take pictures or create small videos and upload them in your social media. This would translate the theoretical learning of this unit into practical activities and help you become masters of this subject. So far in this module, we have looked at the historical evolution of ties and we have also shown you some interesting tie knots. I think it would be interesting for you to go out into the market and look at stores. See the ties that are out there in the display. Find out what catches your fancy. Are you interested in plain, solid, simple ties? Or is your mind gravitated towards the wildly ornate jacquard patterns? If you are looking to buy your first tie, I recommend that you buy a dark red, a burgundy or a navy tie to begin with. A black tie is also a good option to invest in. These ties are must-haves for any man and they would go a long way in helping you create fashionable looks for yourselves. Once you have mastered the art of making simple 4-in-hand or Windsor knots, you can move on to other ornate knots and experiment with ties that have different patterns like quirky prints, knitted ties or ties made up of unorthodox fabrics. A necktie represents masculine power. The men who wear them are considered successful. They demand professional respect. The modern neckties have evolved from scarves and cravats. In the course of time, they have become thinner and longer, and the knots range from simple to ornate. Silk ties are expensive and must be cared for properly. A tie should be untied by reversing the knot. It can be stored flat or by hanging it in a tie rack. It can be folded by bringing the points together and then folded in half or quarter. It can be stored rolled loosely in a box. Colors, patterns and materials and knots of ties convey messages. It is imperative that we therefore choose the right tie for the right occasion. In less formal occasions, ties and knots that speak about one's personality can be used. As a fashionista, you can experiment with colors, patterns and textures of ties. In less formal occasions, these can be used beautifully to bring out your personality. However, in formal occasions, where you are commanding respect, opt for simple classic ties. Whether it's a bow tie, or a long necktie, or a bolo tie, a rightly chosen, correctly worn tie will bring you oodles of respect. With this, we come to the end of this module.